Hey everybody, I'm at Vancouver Film Festival and I've been watching some movies. Here's what I thought of these first few movies that I saw. First, I saw Loving Vincent, the first fully painted feature-length animated film. And what better excuse for the entire film to be painted than the subject matter of Vincent van Gogh? Before watching the film, I thought at its very worst, it'll at least be visually interesting. And it was. It was a very unique and interesting experience from a visual standpoint. But in terms of the film's story, it was boring. Many of the scenes were incredibly repetitive and didn't really serve all that much purpose in the overall film. Perhaps the film could have been more captivating if it took place while Vincent van Gogh was even alive and not 1 year later. If you take away the hand-painted presentation, what we're left with is a film that's no different than some unheard of made-for-TV educational special that some 8th grade teacher would put on for class. Aside from the animation, there was nothing that stood out as exceptional, and it was very difficult to feel invested or care. The performances were fine and nothing more, and this is probably the least impressive Clint Mansell score I've ever heard. For a composer that's created such beautiful music so many countless times, if I didn't already know he composed the music for this film, I would have assumed it was just some random studio hire. Check it out for the animation, or if you're already a huge fan of Van Gogh, I guess. But otherwise, don't feel obligated to check this one out, because for the most part, it's incredibly forgettable. And I'm giving this one a 5 or 6 out of 10. It's one of the two, it's definitely not a 7. Next, I saw 24 Frames by the late Abbas Kiarostami. Now, I personally love this director and have previously recommended his film Certified Copy and Like Someone in Love. He's also got an interesting catalog of older films that have solidified him as an important artist. He was one of the greatest directors Iran had to offer, and it was sad to hear the news of him passing last year. 24 Frames is his final film and an incredibly experimental one at that, which, given the director, is rather fitting. It's essentially a collection of 24 different single-shot short films, and supposedly each of those shots is based on some sort of painting or photograph. This isn't something I'd really recommend unless you're actively trying to seek out experimental art house films, because there's no dialogue in the film and there isn't really a plot either. It's as if you're being shown a slideshow of images at a museum, except each image is moving and takes 4.5 minutes to view. Some of these shots were beautifully framed and very interesting to watch. The first quote-unquote frame was legitimately fantastic. It starts out as a still painting, but layers of movement are subtly added as time goes on. You start to see smoke move from chimneys and snow fall from the sky, birds flying and dogs running around. But for some reason, after this frame, they completely abandoned the format, and everyone after is one that starts with movement already being incorporated. And honestly, I haven't seen any of these paintings or photographs before in my life, so it was nice for the first frame to at least have some sort of a reference, because otherwise there's nothing to really indicate how accurately he's replicating the image, or which parts are a part of the original still and which he added later. Still, that detail isn't really what drags the film down. The film's greatest flaw is its surprising lack of visual diversity. I feel like a good 10 of these 24 frames were beach shots with snow falling and birds walking around. It's difficult to see the point in having different shots at all if they're all going to be so incredibly similar. It's only interesting for so long before it starts to feel incredibly repetitive. I was still able to soak in the scenery and just sit there and think about things, but it really missed a huge opportunity to be something so much more. Not only that, but a lot of the animation was kinda shit. Much of the moving objects in each scene were filmed live animals that they digitally edited into the frame, so there'll be parts where animals are walking across the screen, but you can tell that they're being digitally dragged across the screen, like their footsteps are not at all matching up with how fast they're moving. A lot of it just looked really sloppy and unprofessional, and part of me almost believed that it was okay because it is a weird kind of experimental movie that has a strange style. But then frame number 16 was an absolute dumpster fire. Again, another beach shot with birds walking around. This time it's a bunch of ducks. And I guess because of how objects in the scene are digitally stitched together, for some reason the blue structure in the frame was on the wrong layer, I guess? Like the ducks would walk around from one place to another, but if they walked in front of where the blue structure was, their bodies would get cut off where it is. So with this entire row of ducks walking across the screen, their heads essentially get cut off by a feathered crop. Like, like, holy shit, how do you even release this film without noticing that? Later in the frame, one of the ducks is walking towards the other, and it's the most painfully obvious loop that they're using to make the duck walk. And as he gets close and stops walking, he flaps his wings, and we get the most obnoxious sound effect in the entire film. For a film that, for the most part, had flawless sound design, it was really jarring. It flapped its wings, and there was this super loud whoosh, 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 like a cheesy sound effect. And then the duck walked away and walked in front of the blue structure and got its head cut off again. And right as the frame was ending, its whole body glitched into a pillar structure for like 3 frames. It was the weirdest thing, and I somehow kind of doubt that the director asked for that to happen. At the end of the film, there's a long list of people credited for visual effects, and I guess a few of them just fucking suck. And it's not like frame 16 was the only frame that had anything weird like that happen. There were instances of weird sloppiness found here and there throughout the film, but frame 16 was an actual dumpster fire. Anyway, as much as I know a lot of people want to truly love this film because it's the last film of a great director, it's not really all that great, even if it has an interesting concept. For the most part, I was able to enjoy the experience, and I'm glad I watched the film. It was interesting and unique, and much of it was well shot, but holy crap did this movie have some presentation issues, and I still don't understand why so many of the frames had to be almost the exact same shot. Despite all of this, the film was somehow less boring than Loving Vincent, and also a lot less forgettable. If you're a fan of his work or really love experimental art house films, then I'd still say to check it out. Otherwise, if you're looking for a more normal cinematic experience, I would not recommend it at all, and I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. Next, I saw The Square, the Palme d'Or winning film from the director of Force Majeure, which is on my 2014 list. Now, this film is a little bit difficult to pinpoint my feelings on. There was much of it that I really enjoyed and many amazing scenes, but a lot of it failed to kind of have a point in a way, which is kind of the point, kind of, in a way. It would be a lie to say this film isn't purposeful, and it would also be a lie to say this film isn't pretentious. It's honestly a little bit of both, although the purpose found in this film isn't exactly something amazing that's never been done before. Despite all of that, I really do love this film, and quite honestly, the enjoyment that I got out of it wasn't dependent on some sort of supposed deeper meaning. I was able to enjoy each scene for its entertainment value, and not really worry too much about how much of a purpose each scene had in the film. It's not that anything felt random or unreasonable, it was just a very unconventional story structure, if that makes sense. Quite honestly, I don't think this film really deserved the Palme d'Or. Wouldn't be the first time I felt that way. There are a few parts of the film that just felt kinda dumb. There's an entire scene where one of the characters is sitting in the back seat for no reason other than to fit the cameraman in the front seat. That was kinda distracting. There's also a line in the film that made it clear that the writers don't really understand how YouTube works. Definitely could have done their research a bit better, especially after seeing how flawlessly my favorite director Michel Haneke was able to incorporate technology into his film Happy End. I mean, that guy's 75 years old and every bit of technology in his film was represented flawlessly. So it was a little bit weird seeing the Palme d'Or winner this year not give as much of a shit. Although The Square had some issues here and there, it was an incredibly entertaining film. There's a very strange blend of mild absurdism combined with psychological horror and comedy and drama. There are interesting ideas and themes that are brought up and reincorporated throughout the film. Overall, it's a fairly crowd-pleasing movie, and I don't mean that in a bad way. If you enjoyed his previous film Force Majeure, I'd recommend checking it out, although I think that this one isn't as great. This film is overall very well shot, very well acted, and very well written. It was often hilarious, and it's a great movie to watch in a crowd. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Stay tuned for more Quickie Film Festival related videos throughout the week, and Amusement Part 3 will be out later in the month. Bye-bye.